So you're thinking about investing in luxury. What's the first thing that pops into your head? Classic cars? Maybe some high-end Swiss watches? Well, what if I told you we're going to look at an asset that's often overlooked, but has a history of some pretty incredible returns?
Today, we're uncorking the story of the fine wine market. We're going to look at its recent downturn, some historical parallels, and really dig into why 2025 might just be the year for a major comeback. Let's see what the experts are saying.
Because look, while those traditional luxury assets are fantastic, their markets are pretty well established. The real opportunity, well, it might be brewing somewhere else entirely.
Yep, we're talking about fine wine. It's an investment that some have called, well, almost criminally overlooked.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why it's such an overlooked investment and break down the recent market hangover. Then we'll get into the forecast for a comeback, and finally, we'll wrap up with a practical investor's playbook.
So let's start with what's been going on, because to really understand the opportunity, we first have to get a handle on the challenges the market has been facing. You know, after this massive boom from mid-2020 to late 2022, when everyone was flocking to alternative assets, 2023 brought a serious reality check. Prices fell pretty hard as investors sold off their holdings, leaving a lot of people wondering just when the drop would stop.
But here's where it gets really interesting. If you zoom out and look at a 5-year view, the picture totally changes. Despite that recent slump, returns for key regions are still incredibly strong. I mean, just look at the Champagne 50 index. It's up over 48%. It just goes to show you, in the fine wine market, a long-term perspective is absolutely crucial.
And you know, this isn't the first time the market's seen a correction like this. Any veteran investors out there will remember the 2008 financial crisis. As the amazing wine critic Jancis Robinson pointed out, the market was just flooded with top-tier wines as people liquidated assets. Sound familiar?
But, and this is a huge but, history doesn't always repeat itself exactly. The key thing to see here is that the drivers are different. 2008 was a massive, systemic, global financial crisis. The 2023 slump? Well, that was mostly driven by central banks hiking up interest rates to fight inflation. And what's really encouraging is that the market is already showing signs of stabilizing.
Okay, so with all that in mind, what are the key trends that could uncork a big recovery for fine wine in 2025?
While the quality of the wine itself is of course critical, the fine wine market is heavily influenced by something much bigger: global economics.
And the key concept you got to understand here is something called money supply. Basically, it's just all the money that's circulating in an economy. So when interest rates are low, money is cheaper, and the money supply tends to grow.
And this right here, this is the critical connection. Research shows a really clear link between global money supply and fine wine prices. Cheaper money means more capital is looking for a place to go, and luxury assets like wine often get a boost. The really fascinating part is the lag. The wine market tends to follow what central banks are doing by about 9 months. So, with many economists predicting interest rate cuts, this model suggests an uptick could be on the horizon for late 2025.
So what does this all mean for you as a potential investor? Well, it means that with prices back at 2021 levels, this could be a fantastic time to enter the market. It's that classic buy the dip scenario right before a potential recovery. Now, it's not just about the money supply. There are other powerful trends pushing the market too. As you can see, the biggest driver is new wealth in emerging markets. That's nearly half of the new demand. We're also seeing a huge shift towards sustainable investing, and this growing interest in a new wave of artisanal winemakers from some less famous regions.
Okay, so maybe you're intrigued. You're thinking, all right, how do I actually get started? Let's get into the practical side with a little investor's playbook.
So what really separates a fine wine from just a great one? Well, it really comes down to 4 hallmarks. It starts with the region. Think Bordeaux or Burgundy. Then it's the specific terroir, that unique blend of soil and climate. Of course, the year matters a ton. But arguably the most critical factor of all is provenance. It's verified history. Without it, you can't be sure your investment is even real, let alone that it hasn't been spoiled.
And here's the best part. You don't need a sprawling cellar in your basement to do this. The modern market has so many ways to get involved, from professionally managed funds to buying shares in luxury giants like LVMH, and even fractional ownership of some of these ultra-rare bottles. Just to see the potential at the absolute peak of the market, get this: a single bottle of 1945 Domaine de la Romanée Conti, one of only 600 ever made, sold for over $500,000 for one bottle.
And it gets even wilder. A 6-liter bottle of a California Cabernet actually fetched $1 million at a charity auction. Now that's definitely an outlier, but it just shows you the incredible passion that's driving this market.
Of course, with that kind of money on the line, there are risks. You've got to be careful. The market is not immune to fakes and fraud, which makes verifying that provenance we talked about, well, it makes it absolutely essential. Always, always work with reputable dealers and platforms.
So after a really tough correction, the fine wine market is showing some serious signs of life. It's being driven by powerful economic trends and a whole new generation of collectors. With prices at a multi-year low, the question for investors is a pretty compelling one. Is it time to look beyond the stock market and consider what might be aging to perfection in a cellar? Something to think about.